Welcome in, everyone. Today we have a truly special show for you as we have Chou here. Yukai was one of the earliest pioneers and remains a legend in gamification, starting his work in the industry in 2003. Yukai is the original creator of the octalysis framework, which he will discuss in detail today, and he is the author of Actionable Gamification Beyond Points, Badges, and Leaderboards, which sold over 100,000 copies and is referenced by over 2,500 PhD theses and academic journals, and which, as we'll learn from Biru, was very influential in the development of Hawks Hunt. Yukai has been a regular speaker and lecturer on gamification and motivation worldwide at organizations like Harvard, Tesla, Google, Lego, the governments of UK, Singapore, Kingdom of Bahrain. You get the idea. Yukai, it is truly an honor for us to have you here today.
It's an honor to be here too.
And also joining us is Biru Ovest, the co-founder and CTO of Hawks Hunt, who is no slouch himself in this topic as he pioneered the application of gamification and cybersecurity training with help, of course, with his co-founders. Good to have you here, Biru.
Absolutely, and it's a really kind of honor for me to actually get to meet you, Yukai. To maybe kind of kick off things, I'll tell a little bit of kind of founding story of Hawks Hunt and how do we found some of your work and use that to influence Hawks Hunt. So in the very beginning, actually, it all started from my co-founder, Mika Aalto, who is our CEO, calling me one day that he has this great idea about cybersecurity. And I was driving down on a highway and thought that, okay, sounds pretty interesting. And I invited him to my basement and we started working on this idea. And it was based on the observation that kind of globally chief security officers, what were their top concerns? So the top concerns weren't at that time like the technology, but they were humans. And especially the security behavior of individuals within the organizations and the attacks that come through the human element. And at that time, it was accounted like 90% of the cybersecurity incidents starts from the human layer. And that hasn't changed a lot. If you look at the Verizon report, the latest one, the numbers are still like 80-90%. It's the easiest way for adversary to get in. And we started thinking, we looked at what are the solutions at the market, and they were really, I would say, more all stick and no carrot. And we started thinking, what would be a product that we as users would want to use that would engage us? And what are the products that we have used that had engaged us as users? We are kind of a big fans of different games and have done also a lot of work in the enterprise SaaS side. So that kind of led us into gamification. And one of the things I started looking is that someone must have framed some of these thoughts. Someone must have created some kind of a way to actually kind of assess this, how to build gamification into your platform. What are the different views into it? Is it just like you slap badges on top of your product and call it done? Is there something more into it? And then I found your work and would love to actually for the listeners to kind of get also a brief history description. How did you end up into this gamification and how did you create the octalysis, and maybe also after it give a brief overview of the framework?
Sure. So again, I'm known in the gamification design world. And so my journey started in 2003 when I was a very heavy gamer. And I was playing this game called Diablo 2. And I spent thousands of hours making my in-game characters strong, with plenty of good gear and a lot of gold. And then at one point, my friends started quitting the game. So they moved on to another game and I quit too. And I was in this transitional period between quitting a game and starting a new game. And I felt extremely empty. I felt like, wow, I spent so many hours making my in-game character strong, but in the real world, I was the same loser. So then I thought, was there a way to play a game where the more hours I spend in it, the better my real life is? And just in general, how do we make things in the real world more fun and enjoyable? So that led to a, again, 20 plus year journey now, pioneer this thing called gamification. And in 2012, so 9 years after that epiphany, I launched the octalysis framework on my blog, yukaichou.com. And first of all, it's called the octalysis because it's a combination between the word octagon and analysis. And it breaks down all human motivation into what we call the 8 core drives. So what I did is I did a deep study on why games are actually engaging and successful. And I noticed that a lot of games, they are not successful just because they have so-called game mechanics, right? Because there are games that are copycats to each other, and one is successful, one's a big failure, and they both have leveling up or Easter eggs or progress bar, things like that. I also noticed it's not because of the graphics. Sometimes the visually stunning game is a huge failure, but the relatively low resolution, ugly game like Minecraft or RuneScape becomes very, very successful. So at the end of the day, I realized all the successful games have what we call the 8 core drives of human motivation. So I listed them out on an octagon shape, and based on where it's on the shape, it basically has different natures. So there's what we call white hat versus black hat motivation core drives. One makes people feel empowered, but there's lack of urgency, so they procrastinate. One makes people feel urgent, obsessed, even addicted. But in the long run, it could leave a bad taste in the mouths. And then I also have what we call left brain versus right brain core drives, which is not necessarily geographical left versus right on the brain, but it symbolically represents the logical brain versus the emotional brain. And what's interesting about that is the left brain core drives deal with extrinsic motivation, things you do for a reward, purpose, or a goal, but you don't necessarily enjoy the activity itself. So once you obtain the reward, it hits your goals, or you get used to the reward, it becomes stale. You stop doing the activity. Whereas the right brain core drives are activities that you enjoy so much that you're willing to pay money for it. And even if you lost all your progress the next day, you would lose your certificates, your badges, your NFTs. You would still want to do that activity today because that's how we measure our quality of lives, how much time we just spend on things we enjoy doing. So this framework that was published, it not only explains how to create behavior, but also understand the nature of the right behavior. Is it long-term, is it short-term? Is it intrinsic, extrinsic? And so it was picked up really quickly. So within a year, it was translated organically into 16 different languages. And that's where I started getting a lot of opportunity to help companies either design or consult and create these values. So that led to where we're at today.
Excellent. And I have to thank you for the work. And also, I'm not sure if you have worked in the kind of cybersecurity companies, but you kind of rest assured that like that work has influenced us a lot. And also through us, kind of one of the core drivers for us is that we help our customers and the end users become more resistant to attacks, that they can actually not just be the bystanders, but also actively report those. So kind of like that work has enabled us also to protect our digital societies and democracies, which is like one of the core missions we have. This is kind of super interesting. So I think you kind of already highlighted it, but typically when you talk about gamification and maybe someone thinks, hey, let's add gamification elements to our product or process, kind of the typical points and badges are the things that come into a mind. Like, are those bad? And like, what are the misconceptions and how should you think about actually gamification beyond the kind of the typical points and badges approach?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of misconceptions. I think the number one misconception we see is that gamification is about creating games. So there are some companies when they hear about gamification, it's like, oh, well, we are not playing games here, so we don't need gamification. When in fact, gamification is making these activities more enjoyable, like a game. So I think that's a very important. Now, sometimes the design ends up looking like a game. It's like a serious game, a training game, right? It's more immersive. It has animation, whatnot. That's fine, but the key, it drives business results. But then there are what we call implicit gamification designs, where the best design is like a doorknob, where it's like invisible. You just use it to open the door. It just gently nudges you to be motivated, do some activities, and enjoy the process, feel appreciated. So I think that's the number one misconception. Number two, I think, is that it's just slapping on different game mechanics or game design techniques, like you said, points and badges. And I think what's most important about gamification is that appeals to your psychological core drives, right? And I think there's a good reason for this misconception, because the word gamification, to gamify, it means literally to make game like, to make more like a game, right? So what does it mean to make more like a game? And of course, that means everyone has their own interpretation.
Yeah.
But games themselves are so diverse, right? Some have these components, some are board games, some are mental games. Some people say dating's game or their career or how to run their business as a game. So what does the term game encompass? And to me, it's something that psychologically draws you in, where you would think about it, strategize, have fun, enjoy optimizing for. And so psychologically, that's why the 8 core drives are important, because you could have badges in your experience, but people do not feel accomplished, right? Sometimes you do a little silly action and it says, hey, here's a badge for you. And then you're like, well, I'm not in kindergarten, right? I don't need a badge for the first friend I make and for the fifth friend I make and surviving day 1 and day 3 and day 5, right? If you're in kindergarten, maybe you do feel like it's an accomplishment, right? And so it's an appropriate design. But for most adults, they probably need something that they feel more proud in their hearts and something they're willing to share or brag about to other people. You could also have a lot of social buttons and features, but people don't actually feel socially connect with each other, appreciate it, or there's no way to apply teamwork to solve a problem together. So in essence, you have some kind of game design technique there, but you don't have the psychological core drive. So in my world, what's most important is to make sure those psychological core drives are brought out through the experience design, and that's where true gamification lies.
Absolutely. And if you think about like when I kind of read the framework, I started at least kind of seeing these games almost everywhere. And LinkedIn is a great example. There are like several gamification techniques they have kind of applied, whether knowingly or unknowingly. One great kind of this example, maybe a more of a shallow example, but was their profile completeness score. So like how full your profile, how well you have filled all the data to your profile. And apparently they got a big boost just having that single bar telling you the kind of like how well you have done that. And it's also kind of the game, I think, like collecting connections and building this profile. But I think it also goes a little bit beyond that, which I think is probably the hardest thing to implement and get right and communicate to your audience is the epic meaning. That maybe in LinkedIn, the epic meaning is that you have your career and you're building this like kind of CV into a place, and it will follow you whether you kind of work in a one company and switch, which is the kind of why you want to do that and keep it in shape. So like finding this epic meaning and communicate, I think that might be that it's much easier to build the points and badges than kind of find that true calling in whatever process or product you want to gamify.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn doesn't have too much epic meaning and calling. That's core drive 1 out of the 8 core drives anyway. LinkedIn is very self-serving, right? It's about building your career, about getting opportunities. So it has a lot of left brain core drives, extrinsic motivation. But I often say if tomorrow was the end of the world, people today would, for instance, go to church, be kind to their family. They might go on Instagram, but they probably won't go on LinkedIn, right? Like
I'm sure some people go and like write that, write that.
Yeah. Like you would say goodbye to people you've made friends with, but but you go on LinkedIn to say prove you're a professional or brag for one last time that you're amazing, right? It just doesn't make as much sense because LinkedIn is results oriented, right? Extrinsic motivation, not experience oriented. Now LinkedIn could improve on their design if they say, hey, every time a connection is made or some job opportunity is created, et cetera, we will do something for philanthropy, right? So as you use LinkedIn more and more, you feel like, hey, I'm planting more trees or I'm picking up trash in the ocean or people. I think this is more topical. Like as I'm finding good opportunities for myself, people who are impoverished, they will have opportunity to have an education or be fed or something like that. So you feel like as you're growing yourself, you're also other people who have less opportunities are growing too. I think that will make more people feel inspired to keep using LinkedIn, even when they are not in desperate need for it.
Yeah, absolutely. If those connections can be made, is there any like good examples that people might know that have this kind of like even a deeper like implication that hey, using the product or like you're making, of course, not only impact your own life, but potentially kind of make a larger beneficial impact to the society.
Yeah, and just because you're a tool or a platform doesn't mean you can't have epic meaning and calling. For instance, in my book, I talk about Apple actually purposely built epic meaning and calling into its brand. And so the 2 most successful Apple commercials, number 1 is 1984, and number 2 is called Think Different. And without going all the details about it, right? The key is they don't talk about products. They don't talk about utility, like, color screen, more RAM, more storage space. 1984 just says, hey, we're here to liberate human beings from Big Brother IBM. And then Think Different just says, hey, because those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So you want to be the crazy ones, right? And so people get so inspired by this, they feel like, wow, that is a higher vision of the world. I want to liberate human beings. I want to be the crazy one who changed the world. And so they build loyalty towards the Apple brand, and therefore they have to do what Apple people do, which is buy their iPods and iPads and MacBooks and walk around and say, well, I don't have that problem because I use a Mac, right? And so epic meaning calling can be built in a variety of different functions and tools, but it comes with strong storytelling, comes with reinforcement and repetition of that higher meaning and purpose. It requires building the community over it. So there's quite a few techniques to build believability, but if it's done, then people in a system could have that epic meaning calling for sure.
You mentioned like that you split the techniques to kind of white hat and black hat methods, which also have an interesting meaning in cybersecurity, a little bit different. But how to balance these two? Is it so that black hat techniques are completely something you want to avoid, or is it a balance?
No, so again, white hat motivation is basically core drives 1, 2, 3, epic meaning calling, development, accomplishment, and empowerment of creating feedback. So if you're always doing something because you feel like you're making the world better, you're getting close to your faith, you're improving yourself, achieving mastery using creativity, again, feels very, very good. And the problem is that, because you feel in control, there's no urgency. You can do it anytime, so you procrastinate. And then for black hat motivation, those are the core drive 6, 7, 8, scarcity and impatience, unpredictability and curiosity, and loss and avoidance. So if you're always doing something just to avoid a loss, just to prevent something bad from happening, or because you can't have something, you're desperate to get it, or you don't know what's going to happen next, you're constantly thinking about like gambling addiction, it's still incredibly powerful in driving your motivation and behavior. But in the long run, it could leave a bad taste in your mouth because you feel like you're not in control of your own behavior. And the reason why I use white hat and black hat is basically it's how the brain would process it. So white hat is what the brain welcomes, like, hey, I'm in full control. I feel happy about it. Appeals to the neocortex, the human thinking brain. Whereas the black hat motivation is more kind of like a hijack of your brain in terms of, oh, I just feel drawn to it. I feel pulled to it. And it's because it's tied to our crocodile brain, which is about survival, right? That's why we feel like we're not in control. We're hardwired to respond to threats as a top priority, right? Or go after scarce resources or explore foreign lands and whatnot. So because it bypasses the defense of the brain and it goes to hijack and changes behavior. So we call that black hat. It's more stealthy in a sense, but it's not necessarily bad in a way. Those are the nature of the motivation. And then there's the purpose of the motivation. The purpose of the motivation could be good or bad. Are you trying to motivate people to do something good for themselves, to have healthier behavior, to improve themselves? Or are you trying to motivate them to buy things they don't need or work overtime without proper compensation and get manipulated? So those things are good or bad. Now, the white hat, black hat is how you motivate them to do it. So a lot of people voluntarily put themselves in black hat motivation to go to the gym more often or eat healthily. It's why some people pay their gym trainers to call them losers, right? While they're doing like push-ups and they're saying you're weak and you suck. It doesn't feel good. Obviously, not all personal trainers do that, but some do. And then later you say, hey, thank you for pushing me so hard that I could never push myself that way. And you got me to achieve things that I can never do myself, right? Yeah. So if something you already want to do, but you just don't have the drive to get there, black hat motivation is something really useful to push you there. So at the end of the day, it's usually a balance. And in our designs, we would say white hat motivation is good for community management, innovative workspaces, for loyalty programs, whereas black hat motivation is good for one-time transactions, like you want people to give you their credit cards or a donation, or short bursts of activity. Like if you have a 2-week competition within the company, it could be fun, adrenaline's high, people are trash talking with each other, and you'll see increased productivity. But if it's a year-long competition, most people don't like to be in a constant state of competing with their coworkers, and it becomes a cutthroat culture and people burn out. So it's usually what I would recommend for most projects is you want a white hat environment most of the time, and then in short bursts, apply black hat to push them for critical activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you mentioned kind of some of the black hat techniques, one of the things kind of I have experience using, like, for example, Duolingo, that you have the streaks that kind of push you to do it kind of a daily, which is, of course, if you kind of, and maybe there are some other apps that have the kind of streak concept, and it's kind of like it really kind of makes you do it. But once you lose, maybe kind of you are sick or something and the streak stops, then it really feels bad. And I think like for Duolingo, maybe the more higher calling is that, hey, I will have my dream trip to I don't know, Spain or Italy, and I want to learn a little bit the language, and that's making me do it. And it's about empowerment. But I do agree that kind of the balance is important. So if we think about a little bit to the kind of cybersecurity side, one of the things our customers who are chief security officers or maybe security awareness managers, they have this kind of challenge at their hands that they have a large company, a lot of people, and maybe the notion regarding cybersecurity is typically it's like boring, it's maybe not my job, it's like stopping me of doing my work. What we are trying to do and our customers are trying to do is build these strong cultures where these cyber skills are basic skills that you need to kind of have in this society which is ever digitalizing, and they say software is eating the world. We're talking about very long game here, so employees have long tenures and the security awareness managers, it's not like a one-time thing, it's more about building this strong security culture. So looking at the gamification and what one could borrow from your framework on building this strong cybersecurity culture within a company.
Yeah, so I think what I always recommend is, besides the epic meaning calling, always start with the right brain core drives. That's intrinsic motivation, making it enjoyable. Because a lot of companies make the mistake of saying, hey, we have these very boring activities, but if you do these boring activities, 1,000 times, you will get a badge or rewards or one extrinsic motivation, right? Which doesn't make any sense, right? It's like saying, I want to make a game that's really boring, but if you play the game a lot, you'll get rewards, right? You first want to make the game enjoyable to play. And from my research, all fun comes from those right brain core drives: 3, 5, 7, empowerment of creative feedback, social influence, relatedness, and unpredictability and curiosity. Now, without those 3 core drives, people would still do something because it's important or it's meaningful, but it's not enjoyable or fun. So oftentimes you want to make the activity require more meaningful choices, strategy, self-expression. Everything's a bit more intrinsically enjoyable when it's social. So either with collaboration or competition, social appreciation, things like that. And then you want to give people delightful surprise, because if a lot of people always feel like, oh, it's the same thing over and over and over again, then they just don't care. And,
Yes.
and they think it's really boring. So in the applications I've seen for cybersecurity, a lot of time it's scenario based. So if you just like, hey, memorize these things. Like, one of the things a lot of people, they don't want to learn that besides it's boring, because they always think, I'm not that stupid. I'm not going to get tricked by these phishing attempts or someone saying, oh, I'm your uncle, whatnot, right? But that's the thing with the white hat, black hat. Their white hat neocortex, like, yeah, I'm an intelligent person, I'm sophisticated, and I'm not going to get tricked very easily. But when they get that email that says, oh, your bank account just sent out $9,000, click here if there's a problem. And it's like, oh, wait, what happened? And that's when the black hat core drives come. That's loss and avoidance, right? And unpredictable curiosity. Yes. And for the time being, that triggers you don't think clearly, and you just want to find out what happened. So you click that button and then you make that mistake. Yes. So I think people need to have muscle memory about going through this and understand, yeah, this is how it works, because they're not analyzing things very clearly. Now, I think scenario-based learning is useful. Like what I've seen before in some of the companies that I've advised and helped on, sometimes it's a role-playing thing, like, oh, something bad already happened, and then you need to investigate what went wrong. And there's even characters introduced, and you have to find out who made the mistake, right? Oh, you got this, you sent this email, or you got this, and you can talk to them and see who's suspicious or who seems to be overconfident, or who's like, I wouldn't, like, of course it's not me because I would never make these mistakes, right? And then you talk to them, you realize they're very like, they're overconfident, but they're not very tech savvy, or they'll use words like, yeah, I did the emails to the people, right? And it's like, wait, why would he, like, that's a weird way to say send an email, right? It's like, maybe they're not even that familiar with the terminology of sending emails. And so that kind of investigative kind of attempt, I think, is more enjoyable and fun, and you're problem solving. So even if you think you know everything about cybersecurity, which most people don't, at least you don't know who the criminal is or who the person who made the big mistake is. Yeah. I've seen ones where you pretend to be a hacker, you see the room, right? And then you're trying to figure out how to break that experience. So those are all more scenario based. It requires more problem solving. I've seen companies that train their employees by putting them in an escape room. And the only way to come out of the escape room is if you learn everything you need to learn and you're applying it to to opening the doors and finding the keys and all that stuff. So I think those are interesting examples of making learning a bit more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And I think like to kind of hook into one point there, one of the things we always want to have in our platform, it's like it's never too easy, never too hard, and make it challenging at all levels. And one of the things we see that we also want to make the failure enjoyable experience in a way and an empowering experience. Sometimes that's bit hard, but we also see that we actually did a little bit of study that we saw that users who, for example, at some point when the scenarios get harder and harder, they fail a simulation or a fail exercise, actually the NPS score rises for those users because they actually feel challenged. And that was a little bit of like, I think maybe counterintuitive, that you need to build a game or a learning process where that user feels challenged all the time. And that's for us has been quite powerful in terms of that it's not just the same boring thing all over again, but as you are progressing, you are challenged more because we know that you are actually really good at certain things, so we don't need to test you on those things anymore.
Yeah, there's actually some games where at the very, very beginning, they make you lose very badly. So, most games in onboarding, they make you feel great, everything's easy, and then you level up, and at one point, maybe 2-3 hours in, they give you a real challenge. But there's some games where at the beginning, let's say onboard is like, hey, swipe here to attack, do this magic trick. And then you see all the special effects, the highest level moves. And you're like, wow, this game has all this animations, great. And then you start to realize, wait, am I losing to this enemy? And then you actually lose. And the enemy's like, haha, you're not strong enough. And then your team gets destroyed and you lose all your powers. And then it's like, oh, I overestimated this opponent. I need revenge. And now you go from level 1, you need to recruit new teammates and you level up again. So, and that, at least when I experience it, there's a lot of that core draft 6 scarcity where it's like, grr, I must get back at this, right? This is not as easy as I thought. It's not just a boring, comfortable journey. And so when you lose to something, you start feeling a sense of purpose to get stronger, to fight that. I've also had the experience where sometimes I sit in a classroom and I just learn this stuff and it's just so boring and I just don't care. But on day 1, sometimes they first give you a test and I score really poorly. And I realized, wow, I don't know any of this. And then it gives me the class. And then I realized, hey, I have to pay attention. I have to learn this because I don't want to get destroyed by a test like that again. So there's various type of designs, but it is true that people have to acknowledge that they're lacking for them to really want to acquire this information.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that kind of it's a bit of risky move to kind of first throw into the kind of deep end of the pool, but it might work. And I think we have gone a little bit of route that we do have like a boot camp, but then as like it's hard when you are talking about company, for example, we have like really sophisticated cybersecurity professionals there, so that like for those we need to ramp up the difficulty quite fast. And I think the best messages sometimes are that when our customer CISO kind of contacts me or us that, hey, you finally got me, that there was a scenario that was hard enough for us. And that also like kind of you mentioned the black hat technique, like what the adversaries are trying to do, that they're really trying to use those black hat techniques a lot in those attacks. So they're trying to bypass your thinking with the urgency. And typically what we see in the kind of real attacks is that the most effective ones are the ones that there is so much truth and urgency, and so that you actually skip the one lie there, so that they are using those kind of same scarcity techniques, urgency, that, hey, now let's say that your account is about to be blocked or deleted, click here to remedy. You go there, and then maybe they use a credential harvester to take your credentials, and they say, okay, now it's not going to be deleted, and then you're just like move on, but you have now given out your credentials. So it's interesting that kind of parallels to that side as well.
Yeah, and nowadays with AI, it's even harder because people can pretend to be your manager, your boss,
Yes.
doing a video call with you or sending you a message, and you think, oh, well, the boss told me to wire this money out, so I have to listen, I have to follow quickly, or else I might lose my job. And people have to be sophisticated in investigating that source, that message. It's hard when you hear the voice of your boss or you even see his face talking to you. like obviously it's rude to question them, like, hey, are you the real person? Like, right? That's awkward. So usually most people just act on it. So there's a variety of things to improve on training, as you know, the kind of almost like the arms war is like increasing on both attack and defense.
Absolutely. And like one of the key kind of like what we want to empower people and kind of equip them is that you would be able to have this like second order thinking when engaging with this type of communication, kind of evaluate the information, not react on it, and like have this muscle memory of like being able to do it so that you're not hopefully acting at the moment, which then leads into these kind of situations and potential damage to the company. One really interesting, like I have to mention, I think like you might totally agree with him, but like one also influential like a blog post for us was this Superhuman CEO Rahul Vohra. And Superhuman, for those who don't know, is like this email client which is very very effective in guiding you to inbox zero. And he wrote that to build great products, use game design, not gamification. So what do you think he meant with that? And I think, is that compatible? At least feels to me it's compatible, but you're in your framework.
Yeah, I know Rahul is a fan of my work too. Like he
Yeah.
shared that on X.com before, and he applied the octalysis principles into designing his product. So I definitely know he's not out there to trash some of my work, etc. I think what he's responding to is the misconception of some people saying gamification is just slapping on points and badges, and and where we know that when you ask people why are these your favorite game that you play, no one has ever told me, oh, this is my favorite game because they gave me these points or they gave me badges. They always say, oh, because there's element of strategy. I like playing with my friends, and all those things. So we took different routes where and there's people in the industry, they have different terms they use. Like they don't say gamification, they use gameful design. Some use term game thinking, just like design thinking and game design together. So my choice was that instead of going to another mountain and creating my own flag and say, look, this is the new thing, it's cool, I decided to stay on the mountain called gamification. Is that let me clarify what actual gamification is, or what good gamification should be. So that was my choice. And obviously, when Rahul writes articles, that it's for content marketing too, right? It's to be a little bit edgy, right? Yeah, a little bit edgy, a little bit provocative. And so, but what he's saying is, hey, look, the traditional gamification of just putting points and badges is not really the engaging thing, but it's using the emotional elements, right? So in that post, he talks about different frameworks that talk about the 8 core emotions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's talks about how to make things enjoyable, and that is directly derived from game designs. So that's his point. And I agree with the premise of it. So if we ignore provocative titles and these statements, you just look at the core of the message, I think what it's saying is something I absolutely agree with.
Yeah. And then I guess the kind of counter would be that kind of if you look at, for example, some of the most successful games in the world, which have those elements of strategy, and as you mentioned, people play because of agency and strategy, but they still have points and stars in those games. So is it more like a tradition, or is it more like that there are elements in the gamification game design sphere that like different people are motivated also a little bit differently by different kind of mechanisms, so that maybe some people are actually like really motivated about the points and star, and from other people you need to actually have totally different way of like engaging them?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you design it. So like I said, the key is core drive to development accomplishment. If you give points, people actually need to feel a sense of progression. And if you give badges or achievement symbols like trophies or crowns, stars, people need to feel like they're proud of it, right? They're actual achievements. Just like, because if not, it's just an icon. It has no meaning. It's like instead of winning a championship at a chess tournament and bringing back a trophy, you go to the store and buy a trophy and you write your name on it, right? It just has no meaning to it. And then there's different elements of how to make it a good design. What's the scarcity? And when you get these points, what can you do with it? Is it just a number you stare on the screen, or can you redeem it for something? Can you donate it? Can you make meaningful choices? Can you just redeem it for a small reward or save up for a longer one? Is there unpredictability? Do you open a chest that could give you some coins or points and it doesn't? Or, you can buy a mystery box and that could have unpredictability. So there's a variety of variations, group quests, whatnot, that come together to form a good design. So I think points and badges are useful because they are easy to implement, like whatever the experience is, as long as people are doing something, it's a tracker, it shows progress. And so a lot of games use, especially if you want to have a scaffolding experience in the sense that over time, people can level up, and leveling up unlocks certain new powers or abilities or stages. It's a convenient thing to do, but without those other components that reinforce the experience, it's just a number on your screen. So I think it's really about how do you integrate it and make it an elegant. An analogy I give a lot is like, just because you have the moving parts of an animal doesn't mean you have a living, breathing animal, right? It could be the lungs here, the legs there, the wings there, just a splash of flesh. And they actually have to come together in a cohesive, elegant way for it to be a living, breathing, flying animal. And so that's the same game design. You can't just be like, okay, we have Easter eggs and points and a mystery box, so yay, we are very engaging, fun like a game, right? They need to connect to each other in a way that makes sense, and then connect to the user experience, how much effort they're putting in, how much creativity they're putting in. Is it very easy or very hard? And that together forms the game experience.
Yeah. And how do you think about, like, of course, if you look at the kind of octalysis and the kind of different techniques and mechanisms, there's a lot there, and no one can probably like build whether it's a kind of a business process or a business application or even a game with all of those techniques. And so kind of how to approach this if you're starting something new, you want to build this into your product or your kind of a business process. So kind of, is there a way, like, how should you apply these different, where you should start? Is there like some kind of a ground rule? Hey, start here and then kind of like expand and then add on new mechanisms into whatever you're doing?
Yeah, there's a simple way and a more comprehensive way. The simple way is what I described earlier, which is just think about first how to add core drive 357, the right brain intrinsic motivation core drives, to make the activity enjoyable, and then add the left brain core drives. Now, with our client project, we have a more comprehensive 5-step process to design full experiences. So at the beginning is define what we call the strategy dashboard. We really need to define what your business metrics are, who are your player types, what core drives motivate them. We usually create like a 2x2, so create 4 player types, and we understand what core does motivate each player type more, and which one's the top priority one, what's the second priority, et cetera. And then the desired actions. What are the desired behavior you need these players to do to improve business metrics? Then we explore what are the feedback mechanics in the platform that could lead to triggers for more desired actions. Each desired leads to win states, and then rewards, incentives are embedded in each win state. And that's just step 1, to find all these components. And then that leads to step 2, which is a brainstorming. And the brainstorming, like you said, you can't have all these game design things in one product. So it's about, okay, which ones connect to the top business metrics? Which one connect to the player types? The player types we have, let's say, are all really risk averse and they hate uncertainty, right? They're all like traditional accountants, right? We could call talking about bell curve averages. They don't like uncertainty, and they like core drive for ownership possession, which is the collecting core drive, organization core drive, and so you don't want to have a lot of those game mechanics that have core drive 7 and 8, unpredictability and loss and avoidance. You want to have core drive 4 collection, organization type of mechanics in it more. So you think about that. So we do the brainstorming that usually comes with about 100 plus ideas. And then the third step is something called a power and ease feature list. So for every feature, we give a power score, how powerful it is to motivate desired behavior, and then an E score, how easy it is to create it. So together it becomes like, these are the low-hanging fruits that's powerful but easy to build. And then so that we say, okay, for version 1, we'll have these 12 features. For version 2, we'll have another 8. And that's when we create a game loop, how all these different ideas and game concept connect to each other. What unlocks what leads to what, and gains what's the booster for another thing. We'll have that full relationship in a chart. And then we go to step 4, which is the battle plan spreadsheet. which is basically the numerical details of all the design. What's the probability of these components? How much EXP do you get when you do an action? How much do you need when you level up? What powers do you have at each level? So those we would all define. And then finally, step 5 is UX UI prototyping and those things. So that's how we start from the beginning and think about, all right, what are the most effective game mechanics designs that appeal to the right core drives at the right time? Because the 4 phases of a player journey, right? Discovery phase, onboarding, scaffold, and endgame. The user would need different core drives to go in more. So as an example, marketing and branding should often be white hat motivation, epic meaning and calling. So people like your brand, they want to work with you, but there's no urgency to buy anything. So then your sales conversion, your landing page would be black hat. So there's urgency for people to sign up. But they signed up and they might feel like, hey, they were kind of pushed into a little bit. So onboarding is back to that white hat. Hey, you made a great choice. That's very smart. You made the world a better place because of this choice. Some social influence. You look at all your buddies have chosen this too, and they're very successful on our platform. And then the scaffolding phase would be all those 8 core drives, any combination depending on what your experience is. And then end game is usually always white hat again, because that's sustainable long term. So yeah, even in one moment, you can't have any of these, you can't have all of those 8 core drives. So you have to strategically, as a designer, think, okay, at this part of the experience for this player type, what are the 2 or 3 core drives that would matter the most? And how do I implement it effectively into the experience?
Is there like a business process or a product where like this wouldn't work? Like at least like having kind of like applying or at least thinking, because I think anything worth of doing, there's always like some kind of like goal and reward. So my hunch is that like there's basically no product or maybe a no business process that you couldn't at least kind of like analyze it using this framework or thinking, or even if you want to go farther, like apply it into it.
Yeah, so as long as you can define its desired behavior from a human, this framework applies. Like I said, without these 8 core drives, like no behavior happens. People don't even eat because that's loss and avoidance, right? To avoid starvation. So yeah, for as long as there's behavior, you can analyze, okay, what among these 8 core drives are already there to drive the behavior, and how can you have more of these 8 core drives to push it forward? It wouldn't apply if you can't define the desired behavior, right? It's like, oh, we want world peace. Okay, well, but what are the desired behavior? You want to define a player type. These people need to do this more or do this less, right? Now you can say, well, I wish politicians would be less bureaucratical or just picking sides all the time. Yeah, that's something you can work on with the octalysis framework, actually. But whether that sells world peace, I don't know, right? I'm not an expert on world peace, but I can look at that desired behavior. Also, it must be related to motivation, not ability. So for instance, I cannot motivate a person to fly a plane across the Pacific Ocean because they just don't know how to fly a plane. I can, however, motivate them to learn how to fly a plane. So it can't suddenly be like, okay, cure cancer with gamification, right? But we can motivate people to work more creatively and more passionately, persistently to try to solve cancer. So that's another thing that we'd like to clarify when people think of gamification as, either it's, hey, it's just playing game, it doesn't do anything, or hey, it's this all-powerful thing that solves all problems. There is that region where it is a sweet spot. It can create a lot of value. And then there's other problems that probably in other solutions are required.
Absolutely. And one of the last questions is, now there's another wave of AI coming over, and there's a lot of thinking about that maybe in the future we'll have potentially, let's see where things land, more like autonomous AI agents doing stuff for us. Have you thought about this new world and how to apply this framework into kind of the next kind of evolution of software?
Yeah, obviously this is a huge topic and there's multiple angles. Some people talk about, will people be replaced, etc., or how people should use it. I think, at least for now, everyone should be on top of AI, play with it, use it, try to create as much value as possible, because no matter what, before even the possibility of the AI taking over and all that apocalypse kind of thinking, right now it's like an Iron Man suit, right? It's the best tool you have to do your work, to be 10x more productive, to solve problems. And so why would you not have that? You want to use the best tool, right? no matter what you think the future would be, or it could be misused. It's like you're in your kitchen and you want to, chop some vegetables, and like, oh, but this knife, you know, out there, some people could be murdered by a knife, right? There could be fights and wars and gang members using knives. So I'm not going to use this knife anymore to cut my vegetables, right? That makes no sense. You use it for your purpose and it's fine.
Absolutely. So if people are interested in kind of your framework or kind of gamification and game design overall, what would be the best resource to go out and like find more information on this?
Generally speaking, when it comes to gamification design, I tend to like to look at the more core knowledge books, like we talked about game design books, Jesse Schell's book, The Art of Game Design, I believe, or Ralph Koster's book. It's called A Theory of Fun. I think those are good books. Also, behavioral psychology, motivational psychology books, Daniel Pink's Drive, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. So just things to understand the human brains better and understand how game design works and how to do better game design. So then you can come up with your own conclusion to solve your business problems. There are gamification books out there. A lot of them are, I think, very inspirational, and they give you a lot of examples, but it doesn't necessarily give you core skills to solve your own problems, let's say. I know, like, for instance, your team, you've been through my work in the octalysis framework, and you got a lot of value from it to apply, improve your product. So obviously, I myself recommend it. I think it changed a lot of people's lives. Go to YouTube. If you search gamification TED, my TEDx talk should be there. Go on Amazon, you search for gamification. I think my book is the first result, Actionable Gamification. My second book is coming out in a few months. Okay. So that's pretty exciting too. But my main website is yukaichou.com. And so you can find things I'm doing there. And when people want to reach out to me, I've actually built an AI tool my team has to, receive people reaching out to me, and the AI will ask, "Hey, what are you looking? What do you need Yukai for? Who are you? Blah blah blah," and it'll help me figure out what they want. And then I read all of them and jump in, so I don't have to start the conversation. Say, "Hey, so what do you need me for? How can I help you?" And then wait for half a day. I jump in and they've already had the full conversation with the AI. So it's called hitmeup.ai/Yukai. And then if you go there, you can start chatting with my AI assistant and tell my AI assistant, what would you need from me?
Okay, this has been super great. I learned a lot. And also, as we said, we have applied some of your framework very successfully, but also as a CTO and like managing our product, I think there's still so much to do. And this already gave me a couple ideas that where we should like explore more deeply and maybe apply and think about testing different things to get better results to our customers. So from my point of view, it was really nice chatting with you, and looking forward for the new book that is coming out in a few months.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. I had fun talking about these concepts.
Yeah, it's been fascinating, Yukai and Puru. I've learned a lot, and I've just been fascinated by this topic for a long time. So I really appreciate, Yukai, you being so generous with your expertise and with your knowledge here with everybody today. I think that the audience is going to have a lot to take back into their own programs. And they'll also, a few lucky ones, have a couple of your books to take back with them too, because there will be a raffle of your book. So I'm sure that someone's going to be reaching out to you afterwards to learn how they can apply your framework to their own programs.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
All right. Well, with that, we will sign off from today's show. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And good luck with adding gamification to your own programs.